Hi guys, we're looking at a Gibson GA30 RVT Invader combo amp. This is just a chassis that's pulled out of it. The client basically bought it, condition unknown, was told that it powers on, had a picture of it with the red light on with the power on, but you know, since the last service record on it was from '95, you know, he was smart and not powering it on and just bringing it to me to have it inspected and so forth. So we're just going to take a quick look at it. Couple things like, you know, the normal stuff. We got a power transformer, filter choke. We have a 5AR4 rectifier tube, a pair of 7591 power tubes. We have a output transformer, and then a reverb transformer, and which I noticed with the reverb transformer we're just about hanging on by a thread here. So we're going to replace the reverb transformer cord, and there's two of them, one of them here. So we're going to put this other one is for a foot switch, which is already long enough, but these two were just hanging straight down, you know, to the reverb tank, and it's just not a really good thing. There's no stress relief for this one, so what we're going to do is we're going to replace these with longer ones and then use like a C-clamp for stress relief, and we're going to C-clamp it here, and then that way we can run the cords down the side of the cabinet to where they're out of the way, and there's not going to be any stress on them from being pulled. It's basically got 60U7 dual triodes, these three, and then it's got a 12AU7 and another 6EU7 here. 12AU7 is part of the reverb circuit, and then this is going to be used in the tremolo circuit. The 12AU7 is kind of clear on top. I'm not sure if it's, you know, lost some vacuum or what's going on with that. We'll have to test it, make sure it works. I do, however, have a good 12AU7 if that's necessary. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over, and we're going to take a look at the underside. We've got your basic two channels. The first channel, just your regular stuff, and we have a global tremolo which works on both channels, and on the channel 2 we have the same except for the addition of the reverb on the second channel. So I'm going to set the camera down, I'm going to flip it over, and we're going to look underneath. Okay, so first off we have a power cord issue. It does have a three wire power cord hooked up to it with the ground going to the ground, but it has just a two-prong plug, and you can see the green wire in here with a little bit of copper, I don't know if it'll come through on the camera, stripped, and I guess they used some kind of a clip in here for an added ground, which that's just pretty sketchy to me. I guess back in the day, this is about a early 60s model, so that just, to me, I don't know. Obviously we're just going to put a new three-prong cord in, and what they used for stress relief for it is just like a C-clip here. So what we're going to try is just to put in an actual stress relief grommet in here that will bind it in there really good, and then go with our 3-wire. And then this cap here, the death cap, we'll be removing that. And then it just gets crazy from here. We got some caps have been changed, but probably changed back in the 80s or 70s possibly. This 25 microfarad bias cap looks original. This one looks like it was replaced at some point, but it's still older. We have just a conglomerate. There's actually, this is supposed to be a 51K resistor, where actually it's hard to see, especially if I can't focus on it. But there's actually 3 resistors, 1 carbon comp and an addition of 2 metal film resistors, all 3 in parallel, which it adds up to about 25K. So it's not the 50K that you'd normally see, or 47K on some of these models. So that's going to be addressed. And then, you know, we got these old Sprague Atom filter capacitors, which they're not like leaked out or anything like that, but you know, obviously they were probably changed sometime in the 80s. The 95 tech, the work that was done in 1995, all it mentioned was replacing a tube and adjusting bias, which, you know, that this tail here, it would adjust the 51K, would adjust the bias. What I'm going to wind up doing is replacing this whole glob of stuff with an appropriate value resistor, and then instead of it going straight to ground, we're going to add a trim pot to where anytime in the future when the tubes get changed, we can adjust the bias, you know, for the new tubes. Plus we're going to replace obviously these 2 bias filter caps. I'm going to use the MOD brand on these 2, and then as far as these Sprague Atoms go, we're going to replace all of them. It's actually a 10, a 20, 2 10s, and another 20. I'm just going to replace them with F&T 500 volt filter caps. These are actually at 450, so you know, we'll do 500 volt F&T. And this is like a bunch of electric tape. Really kind of a sloppy job in the way they put these in. Also, if you get down in here, you'll see the heater wires got electric tape on them, and then it looks like a center tap that's not being used. It's just all taped up. We're going to address that stuff. We're going to put in some new power resistors in this power section also. And just clean up some of this just gobbed on solder mess. One thing that I did notice, just from, if I can get in here to show it, yeah, right here where this filter cap, the first filter cap, where it comes down to the positive node, just a cold solder joint, when I just hit my finger here, it just comes right off. So that was one of the first things I noticed, is just that, just completely, they just blobbed it over the top when they changed the cap. They just, you know, stuck the wire on top and just blobbed on some solder without flowing it correctly, and that's when you wind up with stuff like that. It's just not flowed. It doesn't, you know, adhere to the solder that was already there. So if he would have turned it on, it definitely would have possibly been pretty sparky right there. This resistor here on the schematic, it calls for a 390K. This is actually like a 180K, so it's lower. It comes down. This is an unused pin on the rectifier socket, which they just used as like a turret, and it goes through a pair of diodes to another unused pin, and that basically supplies the unfiltered negative bias supply to here, which goes through the first cap, and you know, then gets reduced by the resistors, or not these resistors, but underneath on the other side there's a 7.5K resistor where this gets smoothed a little bit, goes into the next cap. It gets then from the next cap it runs that tail resistor where we're going to add the trim pot, and then this brown wire heads off to the the grids on the power tubes for your negative voltage, which should be about approximately 19 or 20 volts negative, but we'll be able to adjust the negative supply to where, you know, we get the right current out of the tube. So that's that. That's probably going to be, I'm going to probably replace this with 390K, kind of bring everything back to specs, you know, going up on this and also going up on this. You know, and then basically some of the other things, it's just like some of these solder joints are just really horrific. So, and it just some really globbed up messes of stuff. So, I'm gonna try to remove some of that and just clean up those points and address those issues. You know, just really, again, just kind of sloppy work that was done. Again, a lot of electric tape and stuff like that. Just really sketchy stuff. You know, even like places like, you know, where that was put in, it's just, you know, just mangled. Also, there's a, you can see where this red wire is right here that's been clipped. That's where like one of the old caps was when they did at one point in time replace the filter caps, but that, you know, we're going to do the F and T's on that. And also, the reason I think that this is the newer bias filter cap and this is an original, because if we come down here to the preamp section and look at the cathode bias caps, they look like the same, like probably original component. They're identical to this one right here. So yeah, but these are all going to get changed out with MOD electrolytics, and along with these original cathode bypass caps. You know, on these three here are going to get replaced with MOD electrolytics, and also the 100K plate load resistors, these carbon comp 100K plate load resistors. Most of them, I've actually measured out a lot of this stuff, and most of these plate load resistors are way out of tolerance. Like it should be 100K, and if it's reading, you know, 150K, you know, they're way out of tolerance. So we're just going to replace these with metal film 100Ks. A lot of the stuff, you know, that doesn't, you know, is not under a load or is not, you know, worked very hard, like cathode resistors or you know, frequency circuit resistors and stuff. The carbon comps will stay in there because most of those still test within 10% of spec. So it's mainly the plate load resistors are going to get replaced, and there's a couple of these, a few of these disc coupling caps that will also be replaced. Some of them are just sweated out, you know, and just going to go ahead and replace those with decent coupling caps. And then this one here is pretty sweated out. So that's in a nutshell. Yeah, it's got kind of almost like a old Marshall input style. Might be, you know, bridgeable to where you could run both channels on at the same time. Just kind of trying to give my client a little look, you know, at what I found. Where the tremolo or the reverb wire comes in is right here, and then this mess is a ground right here where there's just a whole bunch of junk, you know, slobbed on there. We're going to clean all that up, put new cable in for that, and also, you know, for the both sides of the reverb tank. You know, give all the controls some cleaner, and hopefully they're fine. But yeah, that was the biggest thing, is, you know, these filter caps and the way that they were put in. Just a mess of electric tape, and why they split the they split the heater wires, you know, and there's electric tape there. I don't know if they split those and reconnected them or whatever, because it stays the same kind of wire on the other side of the tape. It's just not really a good way to do it. It's just sloppy. And when the F&Ts come, I got a big parts order for this. When the F&Ts come, they're going to be like a fraction of the size of these guys. So hopefully, I'll be able to put them in here to where they're neat and orderly, and everything looks just cleaner and less slopped together. I guess the tech didn't even think that the owner, when he did the service work, was ever going to look inside here or understand how sloppily it was done. In my opinion, it's just ridiculous, especially with the way they, like I said, the way they slobbed on that solder on this right here. It just made it a, basically it just comes, it was just put on there and then just solder slobbed on top of it without letting it stay there long enough to melt the solder that was underneath it and let it all flow together, which still would have been a blobby mess, but it would have been mechanically sound. That's all going to be, solder's all going to be removed, and when the new caps come in, there will be J-hook connections, good mechanical connections, and then solder applied. Same goes with all this stuff here. This was just slobbed together, and it's all coming out, and these terminals will all be cleaned, and J-hook connections, neat and orderly orientation of the components, and so forth. I mean, it actually used to have a capacitor in this ring here. They didn't even try to, with these bigger caps, they didn't even try to put everything back the way it was. They just slopped these things in here. And with the F&Ts, they're going to be smaller, but we'll still mount them in to where they're, out of the way and neat and orderly. And then probably I'm thinking possibly right here is where the trim pot will sit, and that way I can just run my lead from here to input a trim pot, and then out of the trim pot back into the ground here for adjusting the negative voltage for my bias. And again, remove the death cap, and then a 3-wire cord that has a ground on the plug side. That'll give that. And basically from there, bring it up slow on the variac, and start testing voltages everywhere, and also on the power tubes, got kind of a weird ground scheme going. This yellow wire here is ground, goes to the cathode, has a jumper wire that goes over to the other cathode, and then that has a jumper wire that goes to an actual ground. So where this yellow wire here is, I'm going to run this straight to ground, and then this cathode and the other cathode, I'm just going to run 1 ohm resistors to ground. That way when I do bring it up, I can measure across those 1 ohm resistors in millivolts, which will equal milliamps, being that it's a 1-to-1 1 ohm resistor, and I can check measuring the current draw as I bring the thing up to power, and as I do, I can adjust the trim pot and adjust the bias accordingly, and that way I can individually check which, each tube, to see how, if they're drastically far apart, I can test the current of each tube individually with each 1 ohm resistor. So if one's doing 25 milliamps and the other one's doing 35 milliamps, I know I got a pretty bad match on my power tubes, and we'll have to figure out something on that if that's the case. But yeah, just a guy that was in here before, unfortunately, just this is not the way you're supposed to do it. It's just, really sloppy. Just must have been in a hurry, didn't want to put much, and he charged a decent price. I don't know about the filter caps, what was charged on that, but the only service record just, remarks that a tube was replaced. It was one of these 7591s. One of the power tubes was replaced, and the bias was adjusted. So here's your bias adjustment right here. Just glob on a couple resistors. I mean, one of them is 470K, and the other one's like 56K. When you go in parallel, it's kind of like say if you had a 10K and a 10K and you put them in parallel, you're going to have 5K resistance. So it's, but 470 and 56, I don't know what kind of math he was thinking about there. Plus the original one was left in. So, it comes out to about 25K. So it's just not even, I don't know what the health of this thing. I didn't power it up for obvious reasons. But it's just, we're going to kind of go back to the stock, what things should be stock. Now this may be an original, I don't think it is, but it could be, from I don't think this is from 1995 at all. But this may have been changed out to something else at some point. This basically drops some voltage, then it gets through these diodes, it gets reversed to where it's negative voltage instead of positive voltage. So the higher value here, the lower it drops the voltage. So maybe they wanted more negative voltage and thus went with a smaller resistor. But again, I'm going to go with some new stuff and then see where I'm at, and then once I get readings, then I can adjust accordingly to what works the best for that bias circuit, because it will be an adjustable circuit. So once I hit the sweet spot, like the 19 volts is hopefully where I'll have the trim pot in the middle, and then that way I got a half a turn either way, to compensate for any new tubes that come in the future. But yeah, just, like I said, fix this, replace filter caps, redo this and replace these caps, do the 1 ohm resistors to ground, and adjust, of course, the bias circuit, do a good ground from here instead of having this whole daisy chain effect thing for a ground. A lot of areas that can be problematic, where you'd lose a ground there. Again, and then some of the coupling caps are going to get swapped. The 100K plate load resistors are going to get swapped. The RCA cords for the reverb tank are going to be replaced and reconnected and cleaned. Everything going to be cleaned up in that regards. And the cathode bypass caps, the 3 of them in here, they're also going to get replaced. So we're going to use the mod electrolytics for those, and for the bias filter caps we're going to use the mod electrolytics. And then for these old Sprague Adams, we're going to use F&T 500 volt caps, so that'll be a little bit more robust for that. And then hopefully once all that stuff's done, it's going to not need attention for some time to come in the future. It'll be, sorted out and dependable and reliable. And then the next video I do will be basically showing, again, from here on down, showing the work that was done to the replacement of the parts and rerouting of stuff. So what it looks like now definitely is it going to be a difference, mainly for performance reasons and reliability and safety, and all that. So this, and then again, this video is basically for my friend, so he can see what, like I said, he bought the amp condition unknown. He didn't, dig into it or nothing. He just brought it to me, so he can take a look at, what happened, what was found and what's being addressed in his amp to repair it. And hopefully we'll have a happy ending video where, like I said, all this stuff is going to be swapped out, and you'll see the more of what it should look like when it's done properly. And that'll be probably a part 2 video, or we may just come right back and show you the stuff. It's got the parts ordered, so we're looking at about a week for that. So I may just wait and upload this when I have the the part 2 right with it. So at any rate, there it is, Greg. The guts that just a horrendous electric tape everywhere. We're gonna get that all fixed up for you. And everybody have a good day.